There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Exodus. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. But I don't think Moses ever expected to hear what the Pharaoh was going to say next, and basically just calling the people lazy, and they're just making excuses to keep from the work. And then in Pharaoh's next breath, the Pharaoh, he commands something so wickedly cruel, because he's going to create these circumstances to make this oppressed people, to make their work impossible. And it's just to be able to beat them senseless and to torture them. And it's like Pharaoh's threatening Moses, don't you ever come in here and ask me for anything ever. Because the only thing you and your people mean to me is the product of the labor that I get from them. I don't care about you. I don't care if you're all dead. You have no value to me. And so these negotiations, they didn't go very well. But it does seem here that at this time that Moses, that he's trying to reason with the Pharaoh. But here, we don't read that Moses threatens the Pharaoh's life. He only threatens the Hebrews' lives, as if somehow that would be some incentive to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh quickly lets Moses know that he hates the slaves, and now watch me beat them. Now think again, Moses. So what we want to learn here is that you really can't negotiate with evil, because evil never really cares. It doesn't even matter if it makes sense, because evil doesn't think that way. It doesn't even think that way if it makes economic sense. And it's the same way for us. We really can't negotiate with the world or with the world's views. You can't negotiate with the devil. They don't follow even the rules of common sense. And so now, with these impossible demands of Pharaoh for producing bricks with no supply of straw, the Hebrew slaves are troubled. And this is all accompanied along with those senseless beatings. And it is a fact that in that city of Pithom, which is one of the two cities that we had read that they were rebuilding, it was Pithom and Ramses, and they call them the supply cities, that during an excavation during 1883 and 1908, by a man named Naval and another man named Kyle, that in the city of Pithom, at the lower courses of brick, they found good chopped straw. But in the middle courses, they found less straw that's not cut, just pulled out with stubble. But then in the upper courses, they found that there was no straw at all, it was just pure bricks, which confirms that this is all true. This is not just a bunch of stories. And many people have wondered, well, why did the Egyptians use straw in their bricks? And some people think that it helped the bricks to slip out of their molds easier, or that maybe that it binded the clay together. But they actually found out that the straw, as it decayed inside of the bricks, it produced humic acid, which actually made those bricks harder. And so now these officers of the Hebrews, and these are Jews who are appointed by the Egyptian taskmasters, they try to reason with the Pharaoh. But Pharaoh doesn't want to reason because he's enjoying this. Pharaoh never had to do this. Pharaoh, he wants to hurt these people because he's a sadistic narcissist. And so when those Hebrews leave the Pharaoh, they seek out Moses and Aaron. And instead of blaming the Pharaoh for all this, they blame Moses. And they accuse Moses of killing them and by placing the sword into Pharaoh's hand. And you just got to say, well, welcome to ministry, Moses, because that's what it seems like often when God puts a plan in a person's heart and it's something that God wants to accomplish. A lot of times people, they won't understand. And even if that person has a great sense that God is going to bless that ministry, where it's going to be fruitful, that success isn't usually immediate. And the other thing is that when someone does start a work of God, usually the devil attacks it immediately, right away from its very beginning, where God's minister will often cry out and says, "What are you doing? I thought you were going with me. I thought I was doing what you wanted me to do." And in those kind of struggles, they can go on for actually years. And so here it begins. And Moses, he looks like he's defeated, but he's not defeated at all, because this is just the beginning. And so then Moses, he does what he should do. He goes before God, and this is right. This is right for him to do, to express his disappointment in God, but he does it to God and to God only. He doesn't go around doing it in front of the other people. And the thing is that God, he's big enough to take and handle all our disappointments in him. And it's also really good here that Moses isn't pretending that anything isn't wrong, because sometimes we'll see Christians, they'll pretend that nothing is wrong when things are really going wrong. And they play this game in their mind, and they'll say things that they're not the way that they really are, because they're afraid that it's going to show their lack of faith in God, or that it's a denial of God's ability to find fault in what God's allowed to happen in their circumstances. But really, we need to be honest with God. And the people that come to mind are these people that kind of follow that prosperity doctrine, where you find someone who is obviously sick, and they're saying, "I'm not sick, I'm fine." Or else someone who's broke, and they say, and they can't pay their bills, and they're saying, "No, I'm not poor, I'm rich." They just say things that aren't reality, instead of confessing their disappointments, because we have a God in the heavens that we can bring all our trials and troubles to, and he's big enough to hear us, and he's big enough to act in our behalf. But we do need to be honest with him. And just like these leaders have accused Moses of creating their trouble, Moses now, he accuses God of causing all this trouble on the Hebrews, as if it's God's fault, for what the Pharaoh did. And Moses says, "You haven't delivered your people at all." And then that's often what happens. And we know that the world always accuses our God for all the evil in the world. And we can find ourselves doing the same thing when we find our circumstances hard. But God here, he never deceived anyone, and he never desired any violence to be committed against the children of Israel. Pharaoh did. God just didn't stop it. He allowed it, because he allowed it for his purposes, but he didn't cause it. It's just as he told Moses clearly before it would happen, but somehow Moses got in his head that it would be easy. But God was clear that Pharaoh would not let them go. And God, he has the power to deliver his people anytime. But there's a purpose in him not allowing the bondage to end quite yet, and to allow it to become more cruel and to become the hardest bondage that they've ever suffered before delivering them. And here I'm just going to tell you what I think. But sometimes I think that when we're in bondage, no matter what kind of bondage it is, and there's many types of bondage of sin that people can get caught up in, where sometimes we learn to live with those bondages, and we learn to live in a compromise with them. And so we're still in bondage, but we figured out some way to keep our life together and to manage our bondage so that we can survive. And probably the easiest thing to look at would be like maybe alcoholism or maybe drug addiction, but this could be anything. It could be sexual perversion. It could be anger. It could be covetousness. Any sin that keeps us bound. It could even be gossip. But because we can manage it, it can go on for decades after decades without any deliverance. And so God, he didn't cause any of this bondage, and he could have delivered them at any time. But often God will allow these bondages to become so great to the point where you can't function anymore, where the bondage has become as cruel as it can be, and so that we have no hope in any natural deliverance. And like the people here, they were not going to be delivered by Moses. It wasn't going to be by Moses, by him seeing the Pharaoh and him just speaking a couple clever phrases. These people, they're going to be delivered by God, and they were going to be delivered when they're at their very lowest point. Because when they're delivered, they will never want to be in bondage ever again. And they would be so in love with their deliverer, who happens to be God, because they're going to know how much their deliverer loved them and how much he went through and what he was willing to go through just to deliver them. So they would never want to walk away from him ever. They would want him to be their God. And so this has to be a great deliverance, not just a quick, easy one. Because nobody thinks much of a quick, easy deliverance where you can just say some cheesy, well, thanks, God. Thanks for the deliverance. And then you go out without a thought and you say, see you later, God. And we're going to see later that even with this great deliverance from this most cruel bondage of Egypt, with all the murders, with all the beatings, out of just this ignorant Pharaoh's violent hatred, where when these children of Israel, when they're out there in the wilderness after being delivered, and what you would think would never be possible, it actually happens. And they're going to want to return and go back to Egypt. And it's not just like a couple, it's quite a few of these people that are going to want to go. Because when they get into the trials of the wilderness, they won't remember how it really was, the bondage of slavery. And I think the only thing that I can really compare it to is like being raised in an abusive home, maybe with an abusive parent, where you know you're going to be beat, but you just don't know for what, because you know you didn't do anything. But it really doesn't matter, because the person beating you, they have all the power. And the problem is with them, not you, but they're going to always say it's you. And there's no one to stick up for you because, again, they have all the power. Or else that have an abusive spouse who beats you. And you know it's them, but you always end up returning because you don't see any other place to go. And a lot of times, even in these cases, when the person is delivered and they have another place to go that has peace, and somehow they still return. And we're going to see that the children of Israel, they're going to be like this. They're going to have this selective memory. They're not going to remember the worst. So here, God is doing everything in his power to prevent this. And though he didn't cause this bondage, he wants to deliver them from it, but he wants to do it at the right time because he loves these people and he's calling them to himself. And so he's going to do his best to keep them from returning to this bondage of Egypt, because Egypt is just like the world. It has a great pull on them. There are a lot of great, attractive things in Egypt. It has fleshy things. There's things that cause you to lust there. And there are things that you're not going to find in the wilderness. So God waits to deliver them until they can't see any good in Egypt at all. And so we end here with the people turned against Moses for not delivering on his word. And then Moses here disillusioned with God because Moses himself was too impressed by the Pharaoh and not impressed enough by God.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.